What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we'll be chatting with David Ramil from Locked On Heat as the Miami Heat fall to the Boston Celtics on their home floor in Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals by a final score of 100-96. Jimmy Butler with a chance to take the lead on a three in the final moments of this game. Was it the right shot? But first, a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline, because our partners at BetOnline continue to be the number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. Find the latest odds, news, and sports developments, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball scores, fights, and even next season's NFL futures. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting, the NBA playoffs, esports, the NBA draft, and more. And speaking of the NBA draft, right now, you can go to BetOnline and figure out the odds for who will be the number one overall selection in this year's NBA draft. Right now, Jabari Smith Jr. minus 230 to be the number one selection in this year's NBA draft. You got Chet Holmgren at plus 150, and Paolo Banchero bringing up the rear at a distant third at plus 800. So for all of that and more, head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action available to you. Bet online. It's where the game starts. Joining us now is David Ramil from Locked On Heat and Locked On NBA, who you can follow on Twitter at DRamil13. David, the Miami Heat never led in this game, a wire-to-wire victory for the Boston Celtics in Game 7, and yet with an 11-0 run in the final minutes of this Game 7, found themselves down just 98-96. Jimmy Butler gets the defensive rebound. He's in the open court, has Al Horford with 5 fouls on his heels, playing transition defense, and pulls up for a three-pointer that does not go in. Thoughts on Jimmy Butler's shot selection there in the final moments of this game?
We talked about it on Locked On Heat, and I'll say my personal opinion is that it was a questionable choice from Jimmy, and this is a player who I feel almost always makes the right basketball decision. I don't think that was the right basketball decision. Even now, as we're recording this, head coach Eric Spoelstra talking about Jimmy Butler and that shot and saying that was the right decision, applauding Jimmy. But what's he going to say? He's his superstar. He's proven over this playoffs that he can hit that three-point shot, maybe not under these kinds of circumstances, and certainly not having played every second of the game up to this point, something to consider. Like, he was exhausted. He had played 47 and a half minutes before taking that three-point shot, and it just rimmed out. If he hits it, it's a completely different conversation. We're talking about a superstar, first ballot Hall of Famer who single-handedly propelled his team into the NBA Finals and carried them with the 38-point outing following a historic 47-point outing in Game 6. Unfortunately, he missed it. So I feel like, the conversation that we were having on Lockdown Heat is, if he hits that shot, it might have been Miami's best chance at taking the lead. Who knows what happens with 15 seconds left on the clock if he puts Miami up one at that point. The flip side of that is, if he drives on Horford, gets the shot, maybe he hits it, maybe he misses it, and then blows out whatever chance he has at taking the lead or even tying it up. And so you have to take those opportunities when they're there. I feel like he probably could have easily scored on Horford or at least gone to the line, but then you're talking about him having to hit 2 free throws too. So not necessarily the best place to be in. Having said that, you wish that he had hit the shot. Unfortunately for Jimmy and the Heat, it ramped out, and they live with the decision. They're happy with it. It shouldn't have come down to it. They shoot 20% from three on the night. It shouldn't have come down to a final shot from Jimmy Butler. Even after that shot rimmed out, you still had 2 more chances by a almost 40% shooter in Max Strus, who missed 2 open three-pointers too. So it should never have been just that one shot from Jimmy. I know it's fine to point at and look at, a deciding point in the game, but it really wasn't. It should have never been about Jimmy having to save the season with a 3-point shot.
And Jimmy Butler was the guy, obviously, at the focal point of everything the Miami Heat are trying to accomplish and do. And, was their savior for a lot of this postseason. Yep. Ties LeBron James's previously held Miami Heat record for 830 plus point games in a single postseason run, having 35 points in this one on the 13 of 24 shooting. You alluded to, right, the minutes, right, the workload that Jimmy Butler has been under, especially in this series. The previous game, he logged 46 minutes. This one, 47 and a half before that 3-point shot. And could that have been one of the reasons, especially earlier in this game? It felt like we didn't see the same level of aggression out of Jimmy, especially early on, until he kind of like turned it on there a little bit in that second and third quarter.
We've seen from Jimmy throughout his Heat career, and I think throughout his whole career in general, but he's just in a better position now where he can kind of sit back at times. I've made this point on Locked on Heat also that to me, there are two players that can really sort of dictate how they're going to approach each game on a night to night basis, and that's LeBron James and Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler, not in the same category as LeBron, but also a guy who can do so much so well that he can afford to kind of sit back and say, I want to try to get Bam going, or Kyle, or Max, or somebody else in that starting lineup. And then when it's required of me to be the go-to scorer, I can do that. And we've seen him will himself to the basket time and time again. He did it in Game 6 after two lackluster performances where he was battling through knee injury in Games 3 and 4, and so 4 and 5, excuse me. So he has, he can turn it on when it's necessary. I don't think that the minutes was necessarily a factor there for him. I just, he has an incredible postseason. He's been great for Miami, and I think it's something that he should really take pride in, being able to carry this team the way he has.
Is there, David, when you look at just the different factors at play here in this Game 7 and what ultimately led to this loss for the Miami Heat? I know you said it shouldn't have come down to that final shot, for Jimmy Butler, the opportunity to take the lead off that three. Do they take the lead? Do they maintain the lead off that three-pointer? But what was to you the number one factor, in this game to cause the Miami Heat to lose this game?
The 3-point shooting certainly was a big part of it. Like they were the number one team in terms of 3-point percentage throughout the regular season. That shot abandoned them. And I think a lot of those looks were wide open. You have to give credit to Celtics defense for doing a very good job of forcing Miami into shots that they didn't necessarily want to take. But having said that, there were plenty of open looks there for Kyle, Max, etc., to be able to knock down those shots. So I think if they, again, we're looking at that 1 3-pointer from Jimmy, but if Victor Oladipo doesn't go 1 of 7 from 3-point range, then it doesn't have to fall on Jimmy's shoulder. If Max hits a couple threes early on, the way he has through most of the time that he's been a starter for Miami, then it's not necessarily up to Jimmy. So I think it's a 3-point shooting. They had some defensive possessions there where they were kind of, lost a little bit. I think that was mostly it, though, was the shooting or lack thereof.
Speaking of not having everything fall on Jimmy Butler's shoulders, Kyle Lowry, a guy that was brought in to kind of change the complexion of this Heat team this season. And he certainly did that. But, at the end of the day, availability is the best, ability. And unfortunately, Kyle wasn't available for large chunks of this postseason. He's definitely not playing at 100%. How concerning, has his play been through this postseason, and the fact that here in this Game 7, he wasn't exactly able to deliver to help Jimmy, in this hour of need?
I think it's a big concern, to be quite honest with you. Not just because you're not sure what kind of production you're going to get from him moving forward, but also the fact that, well, he's on a pretty expensive contract too. And he missed a lot of time during the regular season. Some of that due to injury, some of that also due to personal reasons that he sat out. And yet his availability in the postseason and his production when he did play was lackluster. And this is, you never were going to get a huge score in Kyle Lowry. That's never been the strength of his game, but he's always been able to step up when needed throughout his Raptors run. This is a lesser version of that. He's getting older, and he's not going to get any better. We just had this conversation too on Lockdown Heat. Does he come back in better shape than ever, and things of that sort? Given Miami's culture and the fact that they make such a commitment to being in the best shape of your career, and I don't know that Kyle's going to be willing to change because he's been so successful. He is a future Hall of Famer at this point, and he doesn't necessarily want to change his approach to his offseason regimen or something like that. So I wonder how he's going to bounce back, but I don't know that you can continue to count on him as your complementary scorer alongside Bam Adebayo and Jimmy Butler at this stage of his career, given that he's probably going to continue to battle injury throughout the rest of his playing days.
Well, a few years back, we had another premier point guard that decided to undergo a bit of a, had to take a hard look in the mirror at where he was at in his career. Chris Paul had that, career resurgence. Maybe Kyle Lowry can undergo something similar here in this upcoming offseason with the Heat. But David, last question here. What should be the biggest takeaway from either this series or even just possibly this entire postseason run if you're the Miami Heat?
Well, I think it's that Jimmy Butler is in fact a superstar. A lot of people questioning that, and you could point to those games where he struggled because he was limited by injury and he did not shoot well. But having said that, like his performances, even in Game 6, with the exception of that 3-point shot that he missed, he was exceptional. He can still be the best player on the floor, and that's something that he never gets credit for because he doesn't have the same game as some of his other superstar contemporaries. He's not a shooter like Jason Tatum. He's not your go-to scorer. He's not even the great versatile player that a LeBron James is, even at this stage of his career. He's 33 years old. I'm not sure how much longer he can continue to do this, but for now, he's probably at the best that he's ever been throughout his career. He's playing exceptionally well, and he's still clearly a superstar. Many people question whether or not Miami had that go-to scorer. I think they answered that question, and Jimmy rose to the challenge on numerous occasions. Again, that 47-point outing, historic. His 30, following it up with a 35-point outing in Game 7, also continues to prove how great he can be. What's next for him and the Miami Heat? Those are some big questions. I wonder whether or not Tyler Hero is part of those plans, or whether or not he's considered a trade chip in the future. That's something to consider as well, because he was virtually unplayable, not just because of injury, but even when he came back for tonight's loss, he just didn't look like the same player that had won the Sixth Man of the Year award and was a factor offensively. So he's limited, and you wonder whether or not he can continue to develop his game. So there are questions about this team, but whether or not Jimmy is a true superstar isn't one of them.
Will the Miami Heat be content to just run things back next season? What roster moves, if any, will they make this offseason? Of course, David, you're going to have us covered for all of that and more over at Locked On Heat. I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Absolutely.